Imagine you have, like, this master architectural blueprint for a house.
Okay.
You know exactly where every room is supposed to be, right?
Right.
How the hallways connect, where the light is supposed to hit the floorboards in the late afternoon. You've basically studied this blueprint your entire life.
Right.
And then you finally step inside the actual physical house. And there's just this gaping empty space right in the center. I mean, the blueprint says there should be a hearth there,
Yeah.
a living room, a central core that warms the rest of the structure.
Yeah.
But physically, it's just, well, it's absent.
Right. And you aren't just noticing that absence as like some intellectual curiosity.
No,
You're standing there with the blueprint in your hand, looking at the empty space, and you are feeling the discrepancy in your very bones. It's this massive spatial mismatch.
exactly. You feel the draft. You feel the echo where there should be solidity. And, well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are bringing that very specific kind of haunting feeling into a deeply human, profoundly intimate context for you today.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, but so fascinating.
It really is. We are exploring the somatic and spiritual experience of trans women who experience a deep, visceral longing for a womb. We're pulling our insights today from this really compelling text called Stored Pain in the Womb.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission here is to meticulously unpack the philosophical and really the biological framework the author uses to describe this highly specific form of grief.
It's an incredibly layered subject. I mean, what we're looking at today challenges how we typically think about biology, how we process grief, and really how the human nervous system handles unresolvable paradoxes.
It totally does. But before we get completely immersed, I do want to add a quick note for you, the listener, because this deep dive touches on, social, medical, and potentially politically charged themes regarding transgender healthcare and identity.
Right, which is a hot topic.
Yeah, so I want to be perfectly clear. Our goal today isn't to take a side or, debate policy or endorse any specific political viewpoint. That's not what we do here.
Exactly.
Rather, our mission is to impartially report on the profound concepts presented in this material. We just want to give you the chance to fully understand the author's perspective on this incredibly complex, deeply internal human experience.
And that is such a crucial distinction to make. We are just here to map out a specific terrain of human experience, to understand the why and the how behind this bodily reality, totally free from external debates.
Right. So let's get into that terrain. What struck me immediately in the text is how this longing is defined.
Yeah, it reframes it completely.
It does. It's not framed as a thought or a political stance or even like a conscious desire. It's described as a pain that lives below thought.
Lives below thought.
Yeah, it sits in the lower body and the pelvis as this low-frequency ache. And the fundamental argument right out of the gate is that this longing is not a weakness. It's not a delusion. It's an honest, somatic reflection of a person's inner truth.
Which is completely at odds with how society usually reacts to this kind of pain, right? I mean, society generally offers two responses, and both of them just kind of miss the mark.
Yeah, they do.
The first is outright dismissal, just brushing the longing off as a biological impossibility, like, oh, that's not real.
Right.
But the second response is sometimes just as reductive, which is treating it purely as a medical or surgical checklist item.
Oh, totally. Like treating it the same way you'd treat, I don't know, a torn ACL.
Yes, exactly.
You go to the clinic, you get the surgery, you do the physical therapy, and you never think about it again.
Yeah.
It's just a problem to be managed and fixed.
But the argument here is that this is a somatic and spiritual reality. It's the body's way of registering that something real is not yet present.
The internal knowledge doesn't match the external physical reality.
Precisely. And the result of that friction isn't just discomfort, it is profound grief. The body has a wisdom that operates totally independently of our conscious rationalizing brain. When there's a blueprint for a center, and the center is not there, the nervous system recognizes the void. It's not a pathology, it's literally a form of mourning.
I was really trying to conceptualize how that kind of mourning physically feels. And the closest analogy I could land on is like a physiological homesickness.
Oh, I like that.
But it's a homesickness for a place you haven't been able to visit yet. You just know in your cellular memory that you belong there. And there's this striking definition of grief in the material that honestly just stopped me in my tracks.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
It says grief is simply the presence of love in the absence of what is loved.
Wow. Yeah, the presence of love in the absence of what is loved. When you apply that to this specific longing, it fundamentally changes the entire paradigm, doesn't it?
It completely flips it.
They aren't grieving a fantasy. They're sensing the energetic weight of a body that is not yet whole, and the pain is simply the love they have for that missing part.
Now, if this longing is a profound form of grief and love, you would assume, right, that supportive, loving communities would know exactly how to handle it.
You would think so, yeah?
But this brings us to a really fascinating trap described in the material. It's the danger of compassionate spaces. It turns out that well-meaning people can actually cause a significant amount of harm through something called fast reassurance.
And this is where the mechanics of grief get really counterintuitive.
Okay, I'll admit, I struggled with this part. I really have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because the author says that telling a trans woman, you don't need a womb to be a whole woman, can actually be damaging. But wait, if a friend comes to me in pain, my first human instinct is to comfort them,
Right, of course.
to validate their identity, remind them of their worth. Why is reassurance suddenly a bad thing? How does that actually cause harm?
It feels wrong to withhold comfort, doesn't it? Like you're failing as a friend. But we have to look at how the nervous system receives that comfort in a moment of acute pain. When reassurance is offered too quickly, it functions as compassionate erasure.
Compassionate erasure, meaning like the intent is good, but the impact is silencing.
Precisely. Let's break down the how and why of this. When someone is in the throes of somatic grief, meaning their body is actively vibrating with the pain of this absence, and an ally immediately jumps in with, hey, your femininity is real, you don't need this organ to be whole.
Right.
The ally is trying to fix the emotional discomfort. Mostly, frankly, because the ally is uncomfortable witnessing the grief.
Oh, that is so true. We hate seeing people we love in pain.
Exactly. But what that actually communicates to the nervous system of the grieving person is stop feeling what you are feeling. Your pain is invalid because your identity is already valid.
Yeah.
It basically forces them to bypass their own bodily reality.
I see. It's like someone's partner passing away, and instead of just sitting with them in the wreckage of that loss, you immediately say, well, you still have so many friends who love you.
Yes, that is the perfect analogy.
I mean, intellectually, yes, that is true. But somatically, in that moment, it completely steamrolls the fact that they are bleeding out emotionally. It tells them their grief is an overreaction.
That is exactly the mechanism at play here. True healing in this context does not require rapid reassurance. It requires permission.
Permission to just feel it.
Yes, permission to feel the longing completely. The core philosophical takeaway here is that grief and wholeness are not mutually exclusive. They are in conversation with each other.
In conversation, I love that.
A person can be entirely, undeniably whole in their womanhood and simultaneously carry the agonizing grief of what is physically missing. You don't have to cure the grief to prove the wholeness.
That makes so much more sense. But to truly understand why this specific grief is so immense, why it can't just be, reassured away, we need to look at what is actually missing. Because we aren't just talking about anatomy here.
No, not at all.
We aren't just talking about a biological organ that performs a reproductive function.
Right. We are talking about a center. Across various traditions and somatic frameworks, the womb is understood as the seat of creative power. It's the center of cyclical intelligence.
The cyclical intelligence.
Yeah, it's a place where time is experienced differently, not as this linear progression of point A to point B, but as a spiral, a constant rhythm of shedding, renewing, and returning.
The idea of cyclical intelligence is just fascinating to me. I was thinking about this like an acoustic instrument.
Lay it on me.
Imagine a cello. It is internally wired, strung, and tensioned to play this incredibly deep, rich, resonant frequency.
Right.
But physically, it's missing the wooden soundboard.
Yeah.
The actual carved body required to catch that vibration and project it into the room.
Oh, wow.
The musician is bowing the strings, the vibration is happening, but the physical structure to hold the sound just isn't there.
That is a brilliant way to understand what the text terms somatic disconnection. And this entirely reframes how we typically understand dysphoria.
How so?
Well, in the mainstream, dysphoria is often treated as a psychological hang-up, like a mood disorder, or just extreme negative thoughts about one's body.
Right, the implication being that it's a cognitive distortion you could just talk therapy your way out of.
Yeah,
Like if you just change your mindset, the dysphoria goes away.
exactly, which is a massive misunderstanding of the biology involved. Dysphoria isn't just in the mind, it lives in the nervous system. It is the friction in the gap between the interior truth and the exterior reality.
There's gap.
Yeah. When the brain's proprioceptive map, Basically, the way it tracks and expects the body to be laid out does not align with the physical form. The body is essentially sending out signals into a void. The interior is playing the cello strings, and the exterior has no soundboard to resonate. And the resulting static makes certain kinds of physical presence, intimacy, and just a felt sense of belonging incredibly difficult.
So if this biological longing is so undeniable, if the internal blueprint so clearly calls for this center, the obvious question is, why hasn't the world provided a solution?
It's the million-dollar question.
Right. I mean, we live in an era of unbelievable medical advancement. Why is a uterine transplant still essentially science fiction for these women?
Yeah.
It comes down to a massive structural failure, but also something much deeper. The analysis provides two distinct answers for this, one structural and one energetic.
Let's start with the structural, which is the tangible, really frustrating reality of our current system.
The money and the politics, basically.
Pretty much. The institutions that allocate billions in resources, direct medical research, and shape the collective legal and social imagination simply have not prioritized this. It's a blunt truth. The failure does not lie with the women who carry this longing. The failure belongs to a world that refuses to move as quickly as truth demands.
The world's response has simply not caught up.
Right.
But then we pivot to the energetic answer. And this is where I really need us to dig in, because the phrase used is a timeline lag.
Yes.
But
Timeline lag.
I'll be honest, when I first read timeline lag, my brain immediately went to sci-fi.
Sure, yeah.
It felt a little too esoteric, almost like a coping mechanism to romanticize a lack of medical funding. I mean, how is this not just magical thinking?
It's a completely fair pushback. Timeline lag does sound ethereal, but if we break it down psychologically and evolutionary, it's actually a very grounding concept.
Okay, how so?
It asks us to look at human evolution and societal progress not as the sudden jump, but as a slow, agonizing crawl. Energetically, these individuals are arriving in a time that is simply not yet equipped to hold them. They are living at the very edge of human evolution. They are pioneers.
Okay, so it's less about time travel and more about being the first wave of a reality that will eventually exist, but just, isn't here yet.
Exactly. And think about what it means to be a pioneer. Nobody chooses to be a pioneer because it's fun or noble.
Right, it's brutal.
It is an incredibly heavy, isolating burden. You are surviving in a landscape that literally has no infrastructure for you. But recognizing this timeline lag serves a crucial psychological function. It dismantles the shame.
The shame of feeling like your needs are too much, or that your longing is somehow pathological or crazy.
Right. It validates the longing. It says your pain is not a symptom of your brokenness. It is an accurate perception of the gap between what currently exists and what eventually should.
Okay, but carrying the weight of being a pioneer, living in that gap every single day, I mean, that friction has to go somewhere in the body.
It absolutely does.
I was struck by how this actually plays out day to day. It's not just a passing thought. It manifests as a literal weather system of chronic grief. It's not always a Category 5 hurricane of panic. Sometimes it's just a constant overcast sky that you wake up under every day.
And it also manifests in very acute, sudden spikes of dysphoria or a profound sense of distance during physical intimacy because the body keeps bumping up against its own perceived incompleteness.
There's also the incredibly complicated relationship with other women's bodies, right? Particularly around fertility and pregnancy.
Yes, that's a major part of it.
There's one phrase here that might be the most poetic, heart-wrenching line I've read in a long time. It explains that sometimes this pain looks from the outside like jealousy or envy toward other women, but it is really just love without a home to go to.
Love without a home to go to. It's brilliant because it completely removes the malice, the bitterness, or the petty rivalry we usually associate with envy.
It totally recontextualizes it.
It replaces it with pure, unadulterated longing. But here's the physiological problem. When you carry that much unhoused love, that much unsolvable pain, the nervous system has to figure out what to do with it. And the nervous system despises unsolvable pain.
Right. If you touch a hot stove, your nervous system tells you to pull your hand away. Problem solved. But you can't pull your hand away from your own internal blueprint. So what does the nervous system do when the pain is inescapable?
It dissociates. It begins to avoid that part of the body entirely. It literally routes around the pelvis and the lower belly in its internal mapping.
It just ignores it.
Yeah, it treats that entire central area as a dead zone, an off-limits problem area that is just too painful to feel closely.
Like a detour on a highway. You know there's a massive sinkhole in a specific neighborhood, so you just stop driving through that neighborhood entirely.
Yeah.
Take the bypass.
Exactly. But here is the tragic paradox of that survival mechanism. By routing around the pain to protect yourself, you drastically increase the somatic disconnection.
Because you're avoiding your own center.
Yes.
Yeah.
By numbing out the pelvis, you literally cut yourself off from your own center of creative, cyclical, feminine power. You lose access to the very intelligence your body is longing for just because you're too afraid to feel the empty space.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of this entire deep dive. If the medical solution isn't there yet, if the timeline lag is a stark reality, then what does healing actually look like?
It's the hardest part of the text, honestly.
Because routing around it causes numbness. But
Mhm.
fixing it surgically isn't fully an option yet either. Are people just supposed to accept defeat?
No, and this is where the somatic framework we've been discussing reaches its peak. Healing, in this specific context, is not about fixing the problem. It is not about making the longing magically disappear.
Okay.
Healing is the radical, terrifying willingness to stop the detour. It is the willingness to return to the lower belly.
To voluntarily walk back into the empty space in the blueprint.
Yes, to place your attention in the pelvis and just breathe there without demanding that the emptiness be resolved. It's about refusing to abandon that part of yourself just because it hurts. True healing is reclaiming your relationship with your own interior, even before the exterior world has caught up to provide the tools you need. And let me tell you, it requires immense courage to feel that level of grief, anger, and tenderness, and just stay entirely present with it.
So it's about holding the tension. Because feminine power doesn't only live in having a physical biological womb. It lives in the capacity to relate to one's own center,
Right.
to that deep spiral intelligence we talked about earlier. And a person can still connect to that power even in the presence of longing. The longing isn't blocking the power. The longing is information. It's a profound form of somatic intelligence.
Precisely. Suppressing the longing doesn't make it go away. Rationalizing it away logically doesn't work. But when it is truly held, when the grief is allowed to just be grief without a rush to fix it, it shifts.
It transforms.
And inside that shift, there is a profound contact with one's own truth. The level of dignity this framework assigns to the trans experience is incredible. It honors those who choose to live fully as themselves, holding a bodily truth that is not yet complete in a world that hasn't fully made space for them.
It's the dignity of the pioneer, living ahead of the world's readiness and carrying the weight of the timeline lag so that someday someone else won't have to.
And most importantly, choosing to not abandon yourself in the meantime.
You know, we started this deep dive talking about that architectural blueprint,
Yeah, the empty house.
moving into a house, looking at the center, and seeing an empty space where the hearth should be. For the women described in this text, that empty space is a source of profound daily grief, but it is also a site of immense love, intelligence, and undeniable truth.
It really is.
But it makes you wonder about the universal mechanics of the nervous system we just unpacked. The danger of the body routing around unsolvable pain, detouring away from the empty spaces because they're too heavy to hold.
We all do it in some way.
We do. So I want to leave you listening right now with a question to mull over. Regardless of your own identity, or the specific griefs or blueprints you carry in your own life, what unsolvable spaces in your own body or your own history have you been routing around? And what might happen if you finally gave yourself permission to stop the detour, step into that empty space, and just sit there and breathe?